Hello, welcome back to Anime on the Sea to Sky. I've got an awkward setup here, considering that I'm double fisting some water and some coffee, one for a little bit of a boost and then one for a bit of hydration, so outside of the phrasing that I decided to start with this episode, most of it is going to be revolving around the award season that has come through over the past couple of weeks, all of which, well, most of which relating to anime, but outside of it we're going to be having a bit of the Oscars, we're going to be having a bit of Crunchyroll, and as well, considering that I was finally able to go through and catch up on the live stream, the R Anime Awards, in order to have the opportunity to see the culture, the decision-making process, and essentially the overall setup of all three of these different award systems, which, to me, most of which are bullshit, but some could also need some improvement, and if there would be an opportunity to have a weird amalgamation of these three in particular, I would have loved to have the opportunity to see this so we can actually have a decent award season that is nothing more than either a publicity stunt or a popularity contest. But at the very least, I'll start out with some of the more somber things that I've learned over the past week and a bit, considering that Dragon Ball creator Akira Toriyama unfortunately passed away at the age of 68, which, judging by his body of work as well as the stress and the strenuous set of work conditions that he was able to put himself through as a mangaka, leading into creating one of the most notable and influential just franchises and pieces of fiction of all time, it's just really tragic and sad, and the world just sucks a bit more with him not in it. It's a little bit different considering that even though I didn't necessarily have as much of a connection to Toriyama's work, I didn't watch as much Dragon Ball growing up, considering that even though there were a handful of episodes on YTV, it was definitely not something that I immediately ran home to try and jump on to immediately catch after school. Most of the random imported, localized anime that I ended up watching as a kid would point towards either Naruto or Pokemon, but the sheer breadth of influence and passion, but just the sheer scale of the amount of people that this show was able to inspire, regardless, not only in just North America, but worldwide as well, is something that I can't necessarily even try to comprehend or even try to quantify, because it's just the amount of people that this series inspired and touched and really inspired them to be better is something that I'm never going to be able to fully grasp, even years after his death. When Kentaro Miura passed, I only started watching and reading Berserk back in 2015. I just recently got off the boat with all of the characters, and I still didn't have the opportunity to just listlessly wane on a boat for 8 years and grow with not only the artist, but a lot of the people as well. And it was kind of the same deal with Dragon Ball, where I didn't really join in on either the festivities or the hype until we ended up getting Jiren's fight inside of the Super Saga. And that, seeing just the sheer scale of what that fight meant to so many people across the planet. Mexico, against Japan's cease and desist orders, held public viewing parties for the conclusion of this epic saga and of that epic fight as a whole. Just thousands upon thousands of people across the country joined together to finally see this conclusion, and seeing heroes and villains of old team up to essentially destroy a greater threat, which, to be fair, is one of my favorite tropes. But just seeing the sheer amount of people that ended up showing up in support, they were handing out flyers and posters like a luchador or a wrestling match that was going to take place at the center of Mexico. It was just a crazy thing. And even though Miura is now gone, and even though Toriyama is now gone, and it's tragic because he was also in the midst of working with an adaptation of one of his older works, Sandland, into a video game. He was still going through with other projects that were going to be animated inside the Super Bowl universe. But even though he's gone now, his body of work, his legacy, and all of those who he has inspired will still remain. And it just sucks that he's no longer with us. So I really do feel like I had to go and acknowledge the great passing of such a titan of the industry. And then in terms of another titan inside of the machinima industry, after this, I still am trying to figure out what exactly is going to be happening around the people of this company, especially with all the different productions that they're currently in the middle of doing. But then on top of that, Warner Bros. Ends up shutting down the production company known as Rooster Teeth, which, to be fair, it's a production company now. It was one of the pioneers in content creation inside of YouTube as a whole, like even before YouTube, even before all of that going, like in terms of Flash, in terms of machinima, in terms of creating fan content inside of worlds that we had already grown to love. They finally, quote unquote, closed their doors after 21 years, which I was already, even though I've still been a part of their fan base for about 12 years now, and it's definitely a lot more different than it once was, considering with the amount of productions that they've been going over bleeding into podcasts. A lot of the animated features that they were doing back then, between Red versus Blue, between Ruby, between Genlock, being either passed to a different studio or having to actually be independently funded outside of the company for the next season to be made at all, is just knowing that a lot of the stuff that happened inside of Rooster Teeth over the past couple of years, even after they were acquired by a larger entity, just was concerning, where there was only so much that they could generate and only so much that they could do to make them seem like they would be a profitable venture before Warner Brothers would can them for not being profitable enough, which is really tragic. But it's just seeing just that specific production company now close its doors, metaphorically, and now it's no longer going to be what it ever was. It's definitely another piece that just saddens me to a degree, where a lot of these things are now, they did the best that they could and they lasted for as long as they could, especially whenever it comes to these kinds of industries and these kinds of companies that require you to be constantly successful and evolving in an ever-changing landscape whenever it comes to entertainment. It's the fact that they were able to continue this going for more than 20 years is honestly quite impressive. I do believe that it's going to take me a while. Like, I still haven't watched the 2-hour live stream which is probably something I'll be doing in the next week or so, considering that it will outline what exactly a lot of the people, because I don't give a fuck about the company. I don't give a fuck about Time Warner or Warner Brothers, like for that matter. Who I care about are the people inside of this company that are now going to be curious about what their future is, and what productions are they going to be working on, which ones are they doing that are going to be shutting down, which ones are going to be moving forward and that can actually bring people on to at least give them proper employment. That is the thing that concerns me the most, especially whenever a large company like this goes under. I don't know. It's really tragic to see something like this happen, especially to all these people who I've been watching for over a decade. And I'll still, regardless, be watching more of their content as it comes by. But in terms of the future of Ruby and the future of the productions that are going to be lining inside of Rooster Teeth, only time will tell. But for now, I would definitely like to thank Rooster Teeth for the more than 2 decades of content that they've been able to go through at the genesis of the internet, and what they were able to not only create, but evolve that entire creative space as a whole. Okay, I think we're done with the sad stuff for the most part. At the very least, there is a service that has finally been able to upgrade themselves over a good chunk of years, since High Dive was finally able to update their website and their app with a lot of new different pieces to their interface, as well as offline viewing and a few of other things that will actually make them a little more competitive in this market, considering that Funimation is now with Crunchyroll. We basically have, for the major anime streaming distributors at this time, we have Netflix, we have Amazon, we have Disney Plus, we have Crunchyroll, and we have High Dive. And High Dive, at this point, is the one that people are going to be curious about, since they are the ones that are going to be sought after next, considering that they are, same deal, almost exclusively anime streaming for their website, so they're prime pickings for anybody who wants to add to it. The only reason why Sony and Crunchyroll aren't going to do that is because High Dive is the one that is for the, let's just say, spicier content that goes through, not specifically porn, but then of course for the much more ecchi and liturous content that has been coming out over the past couple of years. So you end up having Gushing Over Magical Girls coming out this season. You had interspecies reviewers coming out previously. The long sci-fi war drama that is horrendously violent at times in terms of Legends of Galactic Heroes, even though don't let that stop you, it's probably one of the best space operas just in media, period. But the fact that they finally had the opportunity to update a lot of their UI on their apps and on their major services, I'm definitely glad, because they definitely needed a little bit of an overhaul leading into what's to come in the 2020s, and to at least give them a viable option outside of the opportunity to go through. Oh yeah, I guess they also had an Oshinoko, just a little known show called Oshinoko that came out last year, so didn't necessarily have to worry too much about that one. And then on top of that, we did get a trailer coming out for Dun Da Dun's adaptation, which I'm really excited for since they've been given a release date of October of this year, so the fall 2024 anime season. And I'm definitely curious to see how this style is going to be moving forward, especially with Science Saru at the helm. And for those who haven't watched it, and to be fair, the first couple of chapters are definitely a little hand-grabby, which is really concerning, especially in the this does not continue. It is not something that is a constant theme where it's kind of like, oh, this is a thing for teenage boys, and so of course they have to have a little bit of content for them to be curious and intrigued about. But that is only the first chapter, because everything else that happens outside of it creates one of the funnest battle romp supernatural setups that you have seen outside of Mob Psycho 100. So I would definitely put that on your calendars, considering that once this comes out in the fall of this year, it is going to be on everybody's radar. And so I guess in terms of talking about our first set of award shows, which just happened this weekend, the Oscars went through and they were able to go and give The Boy and the Heron Best Animated Feature, which to me was not really much of a surprise, considering that there was just no real competition inside of this category outside of Across the Spider-Verse, and I was not expecting them to give that award, because even though I had more fun, and I do think that Across the Spider-Verse is the better film, the fact that this is going to be a legacy win, the last time an anime has ever won any kind of Oscar since Miyazaki did it with Spirited Away, it felt like the Academy had to give this to him, like, by right. And there was no other reason or no other one that was going to be able to go through. I mean, the other ones that were nominated, which, well, I mean, the ones that weren't nominated this year is kind of just not really ones that I would go and point towards. Like, Blue Giant and Gridman Universe definitely wouldn't have, like, made the cut for whatever the Academy was looking for Best Animated Feature, but if there was ever one of these films that I would have wanted to see nominated, it definitely would have been Blue Giant. A lot of people would have expected Suzume from Makoto Shinkai, but I thought it was a fine movie, but the fact that we also had the opportunity to go and see it in IMAX did really make it pop a lot more than I expected it to. And to be fair, all of the movies being done by Comics Wave are just, feast for the eyes. So considering what they were able to accomplish with that one, it was a really fun adventure romp for just anybody who was looking to have a good time. And I know I'm doing an entire episode on just the awards season in general, and the awards is definitely something that has changed in priorities with me over the past couple of years. It was Burback definitely has a good video that he talks with his brother essentially on what the public conception about awards season has done and how it's evolved inside of the 21st century, because I do remember that in the early 2000s, I would, have, like, my family would just hold a viewing party to, like, see, and sometimes we'd play games and we'd have card shows on, like, which shows would get nominated, which ones would win, or movies, I guess, in this case, and just have a fun event with it. And as a kid, it was definitely one of those things where it's like, oh, the best of the best films for each specific category is going to be getting their due, and they will be known as the best in that specific entity this year. And as the years went by, and as the 2010s rolled through, and more information came out about like what the awards shows for the Oscars actually is, and who the Academy really is, kind of just really pulled the curtain back and took away a lot of the magic and a lot of the hope and optimism and just faith in the jury and the Academy that we used to have, but now when we realize there wasn't necessarily any there to begin with. Since the majority of the time is just half of the nominations are like, sure, they're shoo-ins. The other half of the nominations for any of the Oscars are essentially just purchased and bought so that you could essentially, which especially, of course, being an anime fan, the year that Boss Baby got nominated for Best Animated Feature was kind of like, why does this seem so fucky? And it's like, oh yeah, no, like it's easy because they just bought that nomination just so you could have just so when they were putting it out either on a streaming service or for any of their Blu-rays, they could just say, Boss Baby, the Academy Award nominated for Best Animated Feature, was just kind of like, man, yeah, I guess that's decent advertising, but then again, at the end of the day, it's fucking Boss Baby, and so that really got a lot of us curious and got a lot of us just really concerned about why, like, specifically anime were not being acknowledged for a lot of the series and a lot of just the nominations that happened for these past couple of years. And it was definitely because, for the most part, especially when the animated feature came into being, Katzenberg at the time for Disney was really pushing for a lot of these Ghibli films to get either nominations or to get distribution through the Disney lineup. And so there was much more notoriety and a much more, focus, especially when they were at the higher ends of the company, to shine a light on more internationally animated features to get their due, so it wouldn't just be like this standard North American film fest. And now that they're gone and helming their own studios, there's a lot less priority in order to do so, but considering the Academy, which most of the academies for the voting on these specific categories are made up of people who have won the award before. So it's not this grand jury whose job is to go through all of the different nominations that were picked, and they watch all of them, and they come together, and they decide on which was the best. It's kind of like, no, especially for the Academy that governs the Best Animated Feature, they don't even watch all of them. Some of them hadn't even watched any of them at all. And it got to the point where it's like, yeah, my kid watched Encanto, so I just voted for Encanto. And it's like, dude, wow, there was no magic in this at all. This was all just smoke and mirrors, and so it's just a way to pat the backs of all the people inside of the industry that already make fucking millions upon billions of dollars. And it's like, here's a golden, I know it's not solid gold, but it's like, here's a makeshift golden statue to the majority of the time just give it off as kind of like an honorary thing. But there are, and I say majority because there is a small portion of a lot of these awards that mean a lot to most of these people, especially whenever it comes to firsts that we don't necessarily have the opportunity to see every now and again. Especially when it comes to the younger crowd. But especially when it comes to the demographics, it's definitely curious to see how the Oscars are going to be moving forward, because it did seem from the highlights and from what I saw over the weekend, it was just like, okay, they're taking shots at each other. Like they now are taking some form of humility, and they're not treating this as the hoity-toity, like, we are the greatest film industry in the world and we shall be treated and respected as such. It's like, guys, you can laugh at yourselves a bit. You don't have to be this stubborn and stuck up and this pretentious about these fake gold statues that you're going to be getting at the end of the night, where most of the time they don't matter. But the fact that they are consistently now like making more ways for them to, take a look in the mirror, laugh at themselves, and have that opportunity, because as the demographics go, the only major way that you can do this is watching it on cable. And then a handful of different streaming sites, but only if those streaming sites are connected to your cable boxes. So it's kind of like, then you look at the demographic of anybody who is below the age of 40, and it's just, oh, we don't give a fuck about this. And it's like, we used to, but now that we have gotten wind on like how ridiculous and contentious this whole award ceremony is, it's kind of like, we don't give a fuck. And so the demographic continues to get older and older, and no new people are coming in to fill in the gaps of those who are no longer watching the show. It's just the viewership continuously goes down in a downward spiral, and there's just fewer and fewer people that go through. Where it's like, all we're asking is either more accountability and more humility. And if you have that opportunity to make it more, not necessarily relatable, but at least more enjoyable to watch for a general audience that isn't in their 50s and 60s that only have cable, then you might have the opportunity to gain a bit more viewership. Otherwise, it's just going to be another award show, because there's just fucking so many of them. Like, some of, I know, are televised, but it's just getting so saturated to the point where there is one for visual effects, there's one for the Actors Guild, there's one for the worst films of the year, there's one for television and music and film and media and anime. Like, there's just too many. And so the fact that it used to be, and considering its longevity, the award show for films of that year, it is definitely, as the years have gone by, been losing its luster, and until they decide to take more notes from this year's, where it's like, okay, we laughed at ourselves a little bit, just a little bit. Like, we had a fucking dog in the seats clapping, and it was like, dude, am I fucking high? Like, did these edibles kick in a little earlier than I expected? But the fact that they're actually taking a little more of a comedic spin, and they're taking a look at themselves, is like, ah, fuck, we actually can have fun with this kind of award show. It's like, okay, you're on the right path. So, most recently, because it did take me a while to jump back in towards the rest of it, so now we'll go for a little more of the anime-related stuff. We'll go and check on what happened at this year's R Anime Awards. And so the R Anime Awards are definitely the award show, if we're talking just specifically about anime, because you have any trends, you have any links, you have Crunchyroll, and you have the R Anime Awards. So you have a handful of different pieces that all have different methods of voting, and ones that are bigger than most, and bigger than all the others for sure. But it's definitely interesting to see the trade-offs and what is presented as more important and what things are just cast aside, and it's kind of like an overthink. It's like, oh, well, we're hoarding the award show, so that's like all we need to do. It's like, we just need to have a public award show that is in Japan, and we've already done our job. It's like, absolutely fucking not. So at the very least, when we're talking about the R Anime Awards show, they essentially have anywhere between 8 to 10 nominees, which are a mix from the public vote and the jury vote on which who gets nominated. And so then they end up getting their list of nominees. The juries are all volunteer, so they basically get a couple of dozen people into the jury set in order to have like a proper setup of people who they will have known to have watched every single show of the category that they are nominating and voting on, and so they will have a very centric and a much more objective view of what will be the best shows for that category, because we have been guaranteed that everybody inside the jury has watched every single show from from the category that they're going through. So they get their jurors. The juries, over the course of those few months, go through and watch all of the shows and get a proper grasp on what they're voting for, and then they go for a census. And then for the voting system is pretty simple, where it's just they rank all of the shows that they ended up watching from top to bottom. So say there are 10 shows inside of a category. Their favorite show will be at the top, followed by their second, and followed by the third, and so on. Their first will get 10 points. The second will get 9 points, the third will get 8 points, and so on and so forth. The bottom show gets 1, and they rank the shows by the amount of points, the amount of total points that they got from each juror, and that will create the consensus for the jurors on what the, say, best anime of the year, or best opening, or best character design is. But what I do like about what our anime has done consistently, and I can't remember if Crunchyroll did this in one of their previous years, but they definitely didn't do it this year, is that they have a jury vote and they have a public vote. because of course it's an award show, it's nice to see and have the opportunity for the audience participation to feel like they contributed something to the award show. So they're not just watching shows go across the screen, winning each specific award without having any opportunity to have a say in who won or who lost. Unfortunately, Crunchyroll basically does that as a public vote, and at the end of the day, even though their jury were the ones who nominated the ones that were put up for a vote, at the end of the day, it is just a popularity contest, which is why I hate it to a specific degree and why I just don't care at all anymore. So it's just funny to watch the discourse, but we'll definitely get to that at a later. But that's the majority of the things that I do like about the R Anime Awards, because they not only are enhanced with public participation, but you have a jury and a group of people who have watched every single show in their category, and so you know that even though my show didn't win, at least I can be guaranteed to know that the person who is voting on what is the best has at the very least seen every show in the category, which is hilarious because the Oscars and the Crunchyroll Awards, you can't have that same guarantee. Not from the public, not from the actual people in the Academy. At the very least, you have no idea how many of the specific categories that these people are voting on, and the fact that they don't have that guarantee for an award show is just asinine in my mind. So I do really appreciate that is the overlook and the setup that they do for the R Anime Awards. But the people that sign up to be jurors, it's definitely been funny seeing the dichotomy line up over the last 2 years. There is a really funny occurrence that happens more often than not, considering that you have a public winner and you have a jury winner. And you get to see the ranks of the most popular shows that got the most points in the public winner, and the total rankings in the jury category on what got the most points and what got the fewest points. And so, very rarely, you are going to be getting what is called a consensus winner, where both the jury and the public both ended up winning, and I think we only got like 2 this year inside of the R Anime Awards. But then what happens more often is, considering how many categories there are, seeing the public winner be a 1, and the jury seeing the public ranking be the top, and the jury winner being at the bottom of the same show, and vice versa, where the jury winner is at the one top, and on the same scale for the public, it is the lowest rated and the fewest votes possible, which, to be fair, for some of these categories, it's hilarious, and I completely understand why that was the case. But to know that just the dichotomy of the public opinion and the jury opinion is more often than not so invariably skewed toward specific shows on both ends, it's always like funny to watch those go through. Specifically for short form anime slice of life shows and idol shows specifically, because the majority, it's the one pet peeve that I do have about the jury inside of the R Anime Awards, but I can't talk back to that because I have not seen these specific shows, especially when it came down to Anime of the Year. Because more often than not, the idol shows will pop up consistently on the jurors list and much higher than the public, which makes sense because the vast majority of the public vote has not seen any of these idol shows. But the fact that last year, even though I did watch it, Yama no Susume was the one that was the anime of the year voted by the jury, and it was like number 10 all the way at the bottom in the public, where it was just kind of like, man, seeing that dichotomy is always fucking funny. I do believe that at least for 2022, Cyberpunk Edge Runners was the best show of the year, and it got second place for sure in the jury, but it was just so funny how, of course, the jury and the public was already at a dichotomy, but it's like, you want to see us do one better? We think that the best fucking show of the year in 2022, a year that was stacked. You had the 3rd season of Kaguya-sama Love is War. You had Chainsaw Man. You had the first half of Spy Family. You had Akabi-chan, which was arguably what I thought was the best slice of life show of the year, but then I still do think that, Yama no Susume had its points. You had Licorice Recoil for originals, you had Osama Ranking, you had Bocchi the Rock, you had Cyberpunk. And over all of those, the jury still thought, you know what? The middle schoolers climbing mountains slice of life show is going to be the best one of the year. And so everybody was kind of like, what the fuck is going on? And leading into more for this year, where a show that I had never seen but knew that it had different iterations as most idol shows go, where in this case it was Bang Dream. And so this was, I believe, the 4th season of Bang Dream, but it was of a different group of girls. It was a complete standalone story. You didn't have to watch any of the previous seasons, but it didn't necessarily matter because I didn't watch any of them at all. And I'm not surprised at all that the jury decided to go for this, because odds are, if you see this for any of the years to come and you see a random either cute girls or idol show, then you know that it's going to be near the bottom of the public list and it's going to be near the top of the jury list without question. Because the top 3 shows of the jury this year were an idol show, a horse racing idol show, and a idol show in its 3rd part, second half. It was just, oh my god. It's just, when you see it, when you put it that way, it's because it's like, I can't necessarily fault anybody, and I can't necessarily talk back either, because it's like, I will guarantee, even though a lot of people have told me that Uma Musume is a really good sports character drama with idol stuff sprinkled in, it's still, of course, it's an idol show, so I'm not going to be too excited or putting it too much of a priority to at least put it at the top of the list over all the other things that I have to catch up on. But then also it's like, hey, guess what? All 3 of these specific idol ones are going to be the unanimous best 3 shows of the year by the jury. And I don't believe it was the bottom for it was close, where basically the top 4 of the year from the jury were the bottom 4 of the year for the public voting, which I couldn't expect anything less. However, this year was definitely, it was kind of like an awkward, compared to just the bangers that we ended up getting back in 2022. 2023 was kind of a little more of an awkward year, where it was like, all right, you had Vinland Saga Season 2, you had Talentless Reincarnation Season 2, you had JJK Season 2, you had Oshinoko, you had Onimai, and you had Spy Family Season 2. So a lot of these newer pieces, but the one that I didn't watch, where, of course, I'm complaining mostly about the Anime of the Year segment, even though there were so many like good pieces that ended up coming out in this year. But and then also Heavenly Delusion, which was the best one of the year for the other anime ranking sites. I could have totally seen Heavenly Delusion being at the top, because that is the biggest show that I missed in the last year, and I didn't have the opportunity to catch myself back up on, because I did believe that it was on Disney+. But the only award that I do know about that won in Crunchyroll was, of course, JJK. They ended up winning Anime of the Year. But it's just absolutely crazy to just see the absolute dichotomy, and I just don't know whether to call that pretentious or just saying that you really missed something, or that there is an internal bias, because of course, because this has been the last 2 years that a lot of the idol shows have had the opportunity to go through and really find a lot of success in there. So it's just, the system that the R Anime Awards has given is one that I am a lot more complacent with, and one that I would like to see enacted on more by Crunchyroll specifically. But it's also interesting to kind of just see the type of people that sign up to be jurors, and that the majority of the time that these pop up, the idols are going to be having, like the idol and the magical girl stuff, and the young girl slice of life stuff, are going to have the opportunity to have a better pull over the jury specifically than a lot of the other ones. So it's definitely interesting to see how that trait is going to be going moving forward. But I mean, outside of it, there was still like a lot of good stuff inside the series, because I mean, we didn't have Freyrin Beyond the Funeral inside this year because the show is still ongoing, so they couldn't really go through there. Same deal with a few of the other categories. But the one thing that they also do, which we will get to later in the Crunchyroll, is that they actually take these shows from this year. They don't, because at the very least with the Oscars, they do have like a time limit that's kind of about at the end of January. So it's kind of like the beginning of February to the end of January, I think, is the cutoff for movies to be nominated for an Oscar. But then Crunchyroll has this genius fucking idea that we'll get to later, where they want different seasons from different years to be different nominations in different award shows. Which to me is just fucking asinine, but it's like, oh yeah, no, it gives us more time to actually go through it. And it's like, judging by what you do and what you set up, there is no fucking way that you really needed that much extra time to make this event happen. So we'll get to that. But it's kind of like, yeah, seeing a lot more of these opportunities for a lot of these other shows, like, say, Uma Musume, Bungo Stray Dogs, Sarune, as well, is definitely something that I do appreciate got a little more limelight. The one major show, or I guess the two major shows, I guess, that I'm going to be taking away from our anime for me to watch specifically is probably going to be finally catching up on Sarune Season 2, because even though it's from Kyoto Animation, and I make it a effort to go and watch every single new Kyoto Animation show that comes out, I never did get around to watching it last year. But then also, same deal, everybody says, like, dude, get into Uma Musume. Not only, where it's like, oh, it's a horse idol show. It's like, no, it's a, sure, there's idols in it, but it is a sports drama, it is a character drama, it is something that incorporates more aspects of music into the majority of the themes that a lot of these characters have to go and overcome. So really give yourself the opportunity to go and watch the horse idol show. It's like, oh, for Christ's sake, man. But now we get to the quote-unquote big dog of the anime award industry, which is the Crunchyroll Anime Awards, which I thought was cool the first year they did it, and every subsequent year after that has been a complete and utter fucking mess. Not because of the production, not because of the events that they end up holding on, and the opportunities and the different ways that they can give directors and animators and other pieces of the staff more opportunities to be recognized for the incredibly intense work that they do inside of all of these productions, but just have the opportunity to shine light on a couple of shows that wouldn't have been given the time of day otherwise. And that's about the only positive things that I can say about the Crunchyroll Awards, because holy shit, is this the exact opposite, where if the Oscars were this random, unknown, pretentious group of people that are voting on specific movies that they haven't even watched to win the award, this is the exact opposite side of the spectrum, where it's like, okay, we have a jury, and all they have to do is mostly nominate which shows get picked and which shows will be voted on, and then they basically can just, look, not fuck off for the rest of it, but then the majority of it's going to be going into public voting. Because the system inside of the Crunchyroll Awards is that the jury is picked, and they pick the shows that are nominated for each award. And then they hold a public vote on who wins inside of that category. And my problem is that they say that the jury also gets to vote along with the public on what they think the winner of each category is going to be. Unfortunately, we don't know how much sway and how much priority the votes from the jury get against the public voting. Because if you said where it's kind of like, all right, we'll do it a 50-50, if 50% of the vote is based off of the jury and then the other 50% of the vote is based off of the public, I could probably see that being a little more recognizable and a little less of a popularity contest. But at the end of the day, especially with how they did this year, they went back to the basic standard bullshit setup, and the Crunchyroll Anime Awards, once again, are a popularity contest. And it's not that I hate a popularity contest vote, I just hate that it is fucking boring. Because you know the winners of each of these categories 99% of the time. Except, of course, I'm going to be going through all of these awards, but the ones that I'm not going to say is like, okay, so who was the best anime VA from Spanish? Or what's the best VA from Portuguese? It's like, I have no experience and no knowledge or wherewithal, so I can't say anything. Except I'm looking through these, and you have one from Dr. Stone, two from, like, the other half are from Chainsaw Man, and then the rest are basically just Gojo from JJK. So it's kind of like, okay, cool, you had how many? 9 different language categories for VAs, and it came down to just 3 shows. And it's like, okay, awesome, sick. I even though I have no experience or like cultural significance of the language, I definitely know that that's already fucking ridiculous because it all went down to public vote. So the one major, so it's just the fact that the majority of this stuff, which is why I stopped caring about it years ago, is that, look, this specific system, it's not that it's disingenuous, it's just that it's boring. So it doesn't matter if you have a jury selecting what shows get put in the category if the most popular show is going to win the majority of the time. So the biggest thing for me is that I have not seen any of the results of these awards. The only one, of course, because it popped up on our anime's front page, is that I know who the winner of the best anime of the year is, which, of course, is JJK Season 2. So I'm going to be curious to see how many of those roll through, because I'm pretty sure 3 or 4 of those awards have already gone to JJK Season 2 and have already gone even more into their pockets. So another bad thing, because I'm going to be saying a lot of bad things probably for the rest of the episode, is that so why do the Crunchyroll Anime Awards also get dunked on so much? Where it's just kind of like, they don't call it the Crunchyroll Awards. Most of the time they call it the X Show Awards. So they call it the Yuri on Ice Award. They call it the My Hero Academia Award. They call it the Jujutsu Kaisen Awards, because whenever you put it down to a popularity contest for the vast majority of the voting, of course, it would be nice if I knew the scale of influence that the jurors' vote had in the grand scheme of voting. However, we don't get that. All they say on their website is that the jurors also vote with the public, and that's it. So we get nothing. We get no information, no general idea about what the setup for this is going on, and so it's kind of like, okay, great. So now you have people just going and voting for their favorite shows, because I highly doubt that most people are going to be watching more than even 20 shows a year. I highly doubt. I would actually really, to be fair, if there is something that Crunchyroll can do, because I recently did get into their podcast, which is I am very, very close to dropping, because the majority of the time is just not necessarily anything exciting or new to learn about. Whenever they bring on industry guests to give us new information about pieces that we wouldn't have known, that's what I like. I like the fact that they can use that platform to have the opportunity to get interviews and special guests that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise. But unfortunately, the energy and the connection between the current 3 people that they have running the podcast on their own is definitely not good enough to be long-sustaining. But whenever they bring on these guests, they do a really good job bouncing that back and forth and giving people new opportunities and new things to learn. Where was I at with these awards? Also, something that I really don't fucking get is they decided, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, where they are going to pick their awards and their shows from the fall season of the year before, all the way up to the end of summer to the year that they are voting on. So you're not getting the 2023 Anime Awards, you are getting the October to December of 2022 plus the January to the end of September awards of 2023, which to me is asinine because they held this award ceremony on March 2nd. So you're telling me that 2 months is too little time? Like, you're telling me that in order to make a popularity contest of your different nominees, you're telling me it takes you 5 months to make a decision on who gets to be nominated? Absolutely fucking not. 5 months for a production setup for an event inside of Tokyo? That's something I don't have any expertise on. Like, if it takes you guys 5 months to figure out the guest list, to figure out the timing, to figure out the venue, to figure out basically everything revolving around that scale of a production, then that is something that is totally acceptable. And I can completely understand, like, how that's going to be the time that you need. But you can start planning for that shit on your own. You're telling me that these awards, that the amount of time that you need for the jury to pick who gets nominated and not who wins? Like, you're telling me it takes them over 4 months to make that decision? Like, bro, what the fuck? And it's kind of like, yeah, but they also need to catch up on the other stuff. It's like, yeah, they've already watched it. They've already watched most of these shows, because the shows that you put out, regardless, aren't even that low profile. They're most of the popular shows that we had in the year. So you're still telling me that it takes you 4 to 5 months to pick any of these is just fucking asinine. And that cannot be used as an excuse. So for the 2022-2023 Anime Awards, for the ones that we ended up getting through, so I haven't looked at these besides Anime of the Year yet. Of course, JJK got half of the voice acting awards, and then it ends up winning Best ED, which, to be fair, is a good ED. The only, like, between... Oh, for fuck's sake. Wait, so the Chainsaw Man one didn't... Oh, right. So now it's kind of like, all right, all of these were good nominations for the rest of this. But then, of course, you are going to make this... You're going to make this into a popularity contest. And so, of course, JJK is going to be the one. So, I guess all right, fine. The last major thing that I have to complain is that, which is something that you can't really stop. It's all a matter of circumstance and coincidence that these shows, like, aired at the same time. So, by their metrics, they wanted to figure out which shows were eligible for nomination. So, if they started in the summer of 2023, but they ended sometime after that, you are still eligible to be nominated. But if you are going by this, it's going to be funny, because odds are this is going to be the Jujutsu Kaisen Awards. If you were judging this by a purely objective standpoint, you are judging JJK Season 2 not on the Shibuya arc, but you are judging it on the 6 episodes for the prequel of Gojo and Geto, and how their story as high schoolers folded out leading into the future. So just those 6 episodes, which, to be fair, there's a lot that it could still win on those 6 episodes alone. Those were really, really good episodes, and I really enjoyed a lot of my time. But then, of course, because it also aired all the way through the fall of 2023, then it's going to be in people's minds a lot more than a lot of the shows, which, of course, a lot of these shows came out in the fall of October of 2022. Nearly 18 months since this award ceremony has been held, and you are asking people to reach that far back when our attention spans are this fucking short? It's another reason why these things are fucking crazy. Because honestly, if I had to pick between any of the endings, it would probably be the ending to Chainsaw Man, but then it's been ages since I've watched that, because of course it came out in the fall. And then the best opening sequence, would you look at that? It's JJK again, which, to be fair, is a really good opening. There were so many good openings that came out this year. Like, if we're going between Jujutsu Kaisen, we're going through Chainsaw Man, we're going through Heavenly Delusion, we're going through Idol, which was like a platinum song on Spotify and had like one of the most viewed things on Spotify, period, like inside of Japan and worldwide. And then once Zom 100 finally had the opportunity to get their full opening out, it just like knocked my socks off completely. It was so energetic, so much fun, and it had like a really good hook leading everybody else into the chorus and leading into the rest of the song. It also looked beautiful. So literally any of these things could have won inside of the best opening of the year, but still, of course, because it's JJK, that's going to be the case. The best score between Bocchi the Rock, Chainsaw Man, Demon Slayer, Oshinoko, Suzume, and the winner, which is Attack on Titan Final Season, which I love because the final chapters of Attack on Titan, the first one came out in April of last year, and the second one came out in November. So they're just specifically asking for Special 1 and not Specials 1 and 2, because inside of their ridiculously flawed nomination system, you have to only judge it on the merits of the first special, the first half of the movie, and not the second half of the movie, which is like, do you really think that people are going to read too much into that and not pick the more complete package? It's just really fucking ridiculous. The score of all the ones that they ended up pointing out here, I would probably put to either Chainsaw Man or Bocchi the Rock, but Bocchi definitely is a little easier considering that it is a music-centric show, so that would definitely have the opportunity to go through and get another one. So best... I guess best anime song is a really fucking stupid category, but then I guess it's the best insert song. But then, of course, they just put Idol up at the top. And then they put Kidman. Like, this is so fucking... This is such a fucking ridiculous category. What the fuck is the point of that? Oh, we're best Annie song. It's like, so you couldn't have just had opening and ED. You had to put... Because, of course, you do have the insert song from Bocchi the Rock on there. But the rest are just OPs and EDs. So it's like, what's the fucking point? The must protect at all cost character. I get it. It's going to be an easy pick, but I get it. It's a really, like, common meme, so of course Anya's going to, like, win that category, so that's totally fine. I mean, you ended up having the kid from Buddy Daddies, you had Puchita from Chainsaw Man, you had Suletta from Witch from Mercury, Boji. I probably... Even though I would have liked Boji doesn't need any protecting. He can protect himself, that's totally fine. I would say I've kind of fallen off the Anya train as of late, so I'd probably go with, like, Suletta in that case. But it's funny where the must protect at all costs anime character, there's only 2 characters inside of this entire nomination that need to be protected, which is basically Anya and Miri, and they're both the 2 children. So it's like, of course they are going to be going through that. Best supporting anime character. Hey, would you look at that? It's Gojo from JJK. Outside of that, honestly, because of the finale of Mob Psycho Season 3, I definitely would have given it to Reagan. Zoe from Final Chapters was good. Kana was also great in Oshinoko. Power's fine, but then of course you had Gojo and Geto from JJK, so of course one of those are going to win. The best main character, Luffy. I completely understand that. That's one of the only times where it's kind of like 99% of the time it's going to be a fucking ridiculous winner and category in general. Luffy being the one who wins the best main character of the year, especially with the heights that the Wano arc was able to accomplish with over this past year. It's just a shoo-in. Like, there is no other one that I could think of going towards the rest of it. It's like, sure, Thorfinn had a really good run for Vinland Saga Season 2. Mob finally capped off his entire character arc with the 3rd season. Eren Yeager, absolutely not. Denji hasn't been given enough progress yet, especially in the story. And then Bocchi's just Bocchi, so I don't think she would want to accept the award anyways. The best slice of life show... I would call Bocchi the Rock slice of life. I could definitely go for that. If we're talking about slice of life specifically, between Love Story with Yamada-kun, Insomniacs After School, Horimiya, Do It Yourself, and Skip to Loafer, I would probably give best slice of life in this category to Skip and Loafer, because it was probably the one that I was the most surprised about, and the one that probably gave over the best vibes and just the best feeling whenever you were going through inside of this category. So I could totally see that Bocchi the Rock was able to go through and win this, but it's just like Skip and Loafer was on another level there. Attack on Titan wins best drama. Of course it does, because it definitely would have won off the first special. It definitely was going to be as a full package. So the only other one that I could probably bring up to the best drama would be either Heavenly Delusion or Vinland Saga Season 2. 2 Year Eternity's still garbage. Oshinoko needs a bit more time. My Happy Marriage was kind of up and... I didn't watch it, but it was very up and down depending on the episode of the week for a lot of the people that watched it. But then, of course, the final chapters of Attack on Titan was, if we're talking about a popularity contest, was going to be a shoo-in regardless of what they were going to be thinking was going to be coming out, because it's just kind of like, yeah, it's finally had the opportunity to conclude in November, and it is going to be something that I'm still going to be recommending to people into the future, now that I can finally say it's like, hey, you can watch this, but we don't know where the ending is. It's like, don't worry, the ending is right here. The best fantasy went to Demon Slayer. Oh, wow. I actually did forget that Demon Slayer has a chance. Oh, yeah, so the Demon Slayer Awards. That was also another meme that came out, I think, 2019, I believe. So we also had the Demon Slayer Awards one year for Crunchyroll. So between best fantasy. Now, whenever you get into genre-specific pieces like this, I don't vote on the one that's the best overall show. I vote on the one that has the best just fantasy, atmosphere, aesthetic, world, everything that is revolving around that. So it's like, say there is a best action show. I'm going to judge that show solely on its action to determine the winner on this one. And so for best fantasy, I would definitely go, because this is literally just magical Japan with swords. Like, that's it. If we're talking about like best fantasy, Hell's Paradise has a little bit more of that. Mashal is just, Harry Potter on steroids. Mushoku Tensei would definitely be up there, if not for it being Mushoku Tensei. But my winner would probably be between Ranking of Kings and Ancient Magus Bride. But then again, Magus Bride is more like folk magic, like European folk magic. And then Ranking of Kings was also tough because this was mostly a mid-quel season. So it's kind of like this is the toughest one to choose. Although, at the end of the day, if you were asking me who would win Best Fantasy Anime, it would be anybody but Demon Slayer. Best Action Anime, JJK Season 2, no surprise. If I had to pick like between the other actions that we had inside of this, between One Piece, between Demon Slayer, between Chainsaw Man, between Bleach, I think the weakest one of the bunch is probably Bleach, followed up by Attack on Titan, but that's mostly because they weren't necessarily focused on that, because the action-centric show focused solely on action that had the weakest was probably Bleach. But considering that we're talking about the first half was really exceptional, especially with what happened with the squad leader and the feats that they were able to accomplish inside of that season. But then JJK Season 2 is definitely a shoo-in. If it wasn't JJK, based on the heights and the achievements that they were able to accomplish inside of the Wano arc, I would probably give it to One Piece. But, of course, how much of the Wano arc happened past October and before September? So it's just kind of like, oh great, now I have to go back and think about those specifically. Best comedy going to Spy Family. I guess so. Because the only real... Because it's tough, where it's just like slice of life... Bocchi does have a lot of good comedy, but I wouldn't call it a comedy, which is the problem. Like, Buddy Daddies is also the same deal, where it's like a action dramedy, so there's a bit of comedy, but I don't know how much of that essentially goes through and bleeds into the show. Mashal is same deal, Harry Potter on steroids, so it's mostly it's an action comedy. Spy Family's... Spy Family, I guess, is... But it's not funny, to me, as much. They get, like, 1 or 2 jokes an episode, but then everything else is kind of more action or drama focused, especially with the second season. And then Zob 100, same deal. It's more of like a character drama, and the comedy just is littered throughout in the same deal, where it's more of like a drama rather than a comedy. So for this one, honestly, I don't know. And like Urusei Yatsura is a rom-com, so just take that what you will. The best romance of the year being Horimiya. Tomo-chan was a better romance. Skip to Loafer, even though it was romantic undertones, you definitely feel a relationship growing there, and I would pick that over it in the heartbeat. Love Story with Yamada, I would pick that over it. My Happy Marriage, same deal, was the only one that I didn't watch, and people were kind of like up and down on the relationship in the show as a whole, so I'll just kind of like leave that as is. Insomniacs was a better romance, and Horimiya was fine. Horimiya is hilariously enough just a compilation of different chapters that weren't adapted in the season of the show, which technically is over. And so technically it's the only romance on this thing, or actually no, like, wait, Cam and I also watched Insomniacs after school, but not as many people watched it, because of course they watched Horimiya because it was the second season of a show that they enjoyed, so once again, it is a popularity contest. Best art direction, which people would definitely just attribute to what show looked the best, and it's kind of like, okay, well then they're going to go with Demon Slayer. If we're talking about art direction, I would probably give that more towards either Chainsaw Man or Hell's Paradise, because just the grungy hellscape that is like an 80s, 90s Japan, especially with all of the interactions that the devils have on the world as a whole. Same deal with Hell's Paradise. The fantastical elements on the island that they have to go and venture to give so much more creativity and credence to what you can accomplish inside of that story than anything that Demon Slayer does. The only big thing that Demon Slayer has is the infinite meeting room that the big bad has. And like that's the only cool aspect of the entire show. Everything else is just, hey, it's Japan with creative monsters and swords that light on fire. It's like, okay, great. So just because it looks good, we're going to give it best art direction. It's kind of like, I would have put Zom 100 above it. I would have put Hell's Paradise and Chainsaw Man. JJK and Oshinoko didn't really have a lot of different pieces of direction that really elevated it, so I can't necessarily go through there. So it's not like best art direction was anybody but Demon Slayer, but it's pretty fucking close. Best cinematography, JJK Season 2. between the rest of the stuff that happened here, especially with how they set up, like, cinematography would just go to Chainsaw Man and Aki's, like, morning routine on its own. Like, it was just crazy, the different opportunities and the amount of things that you could have done inside of Chainsaw Man in order to give it a more relaxed or a more foreboding, brooding, and just terrifying feeling. Where JJK, it's the same deal. Like, this one was going to go to either Attack on Titan or JJK, but then, of course, because there was more camera movement inside of JJK, that's why people thought it had best cinematography, and that's, of course, why they ended up giving it to JJK as a whole. Demon Slayer, best cinematography, fuck off. Best director, interesting. So they had two different directors for the first and the second half of JJK Season 2, and so they gave the best director to the one who ended up doing the first half. So, I mean, that's definitely nice. However, if we're talking about, like, best direction towards everything else, I would probably give that to Hirotaka Mori inside of Heavenly Delusion, because what they were able, like, seeing everything that they were able to accomplish inside of that, man, just from the clips, I would give it to Hirotaka Mori alone, even though I haven't seen Heavenly Delusion, but I wouldn't give it to Bocchi. Maybe Chainsaw Man, maybe, or Yujiro Hasaishi. I would not give director to JJK. It would probably go towards either Hayashi for Attack on Titan, or if I had seen Heavenly Delusion, I would have given it to Hirotaka Mori. So, I don't know. It's just another JJK Season 2 victory. And best character design, JJK Season 2, fucking big shocker. We are now getting to the end of these pieces and another set of JJK awards, so I can't wait to count these at the end. It's going to be phenomenal. So between best character design, I would give this to Trigun, because Oshinoko, all they had to do was go off the pages of the manga. You didn't necessarily have to go towards the rest of it. Character design themselves, it's not what characters look the best. Character design is essentially given to the task to somebody to have the opportunity, whenever they're doing an animated adaptation, to take the designs from either a novel or a manga or a live action piece and turn them into references and sheets and different designs that they can then hand off to the animators to make the transition and to make the process of actually drawing them much easier. So people just looked at best character design and they saw the plethora of different characters that they made for the second season, and then they just gave it to them because they had the biggest cast. But of course, the vast majority of the people just don't really know what character design entails. If we're talking about what the rest of this goes, I would say I would put it between Chainsaw Man and Trigun Stampede. Demon Slayer is just fucking Demon Slayer. Take that shit off. Hell's Paradise was a really cool aspect to see how the characters moved inside of that really otherworldly section. And then Oshinoko, based on the interviews that I got from the R Anime Awards, it was difficult for sure, because it was easy to translate Aka Akasaka's designs. Actually, no, it wasn't even Aka's, because Aka wrote it, but it was drawn by the mangaka from Scum's Wish, if I recall correctly, for Oshinoko. So it was easier because it's not the genesis of the character designer to remake these characters and make them more appealing to put on promotional art, to put on commercials, to put it in the show itself. That's all from the character designer and the people and the artist behind the actual original content that they are adapting. But it's just how big Oshinoko got inside of Japan cannot be understated. It was fucking massive. But outside of that, the designs themselves were easy enough to at least go and to translate onto the rest of it. The toughest design that they definitely had to do was of Ai Hoshino, and that was the most difficult one in order to translate to the first episode, which is probably the toughest one to do, but honestly, the designs from Trigun Stampede, you still had to take these characters that all looked mostly different from their counterparts, where there were still minute details that they still kept the same, because Trigun Stampede is a remake / alternate timeline, different version of the story, where all these characters act the same, but there's a few new additions that are completely original, and the characters that you still know still look different by comparison in how they were able to go through and accomplish what they did. So just looking at all of the new designs and all of the new people and all of the old ones that they had to transition to new ones, and just how much work that must have taken in order to accomplish that kind of a feat should not be understated. And so Trigun Stampede easily gets my vote for the best character design. Best animation going to Demon Slayer. Fucking wrong. I wouldn't give it to Demon Slayer. I wouldn't give it to Attack on Titan. Even with all of the struggles that happened inside of the production, this is probably one of the only ones that I would have given to Jujutsu Kaisen. But it's like Mob Psycho was also really, really good. It's just, but from an animation and a character design and the rigs that they were able to make inside of Trigun Stampede, they would be very close to having the best animation for me. It's between either Trigun or Chainsaw Man as the top. It's like JJK, Chainsaw, Trigun, any of those three could have won and I would have been satisfied. But the fact that people are still going to go with the popular one because Ufotable has a really good effects compositing team, they'll still just say, oh yeah, no, that just by far just looks the best. And it's like, no, Demon Slayer is a good-looking show, but especially with all the bullshit that happened in Season 3, I cannot, in any good regard, give it any single award that it has made this year. So for the best original show, we ended up having Buddy Daddies winning, which is totally understandable. I really did have a lot of fun times with it, but between Marginal Service, Do It Yourself, Birdie Wing, Akiba Maid War, and Witch from Mercury, Buddy Daddies is like probably the fourth best original show that I watched that year, where I would definitely give it to either Birdie... It's really tough. I would say the best original show, just because of how fucking bonkers it was inside of that set, would probably go to Akiba Maid War, with Witch from Mercury being a very close second. Birdie Wing kind of teetered off towards the end of its run, because instead of doing incredibly crazy mafia fight for your life golf battles, it just went to, oh, and now these girls are on the women's professional tour. It's like, oh, so now we're just golf. Oh man, that's boring. Because Buddy Daddies was still a really good and a really fun series. Was it the best original show? I don't think so. I just think it was the one, like, definitely outside of the four that I mentioned and outside of the six total, Buddy Daddies, of course, at the end of the day, was the one that was watched the most, thanks to it jumping off the same sort of feel as Spy Family. Best film of the year goes to Suzume. Not surprised with that one at all. And of course, I'm saying I'm not surprised, not as a term of endearment, but kind of like, yep, the most popular thing won again. The only one of these that I haven't watched was Black Clover's first, like, it's either the first or the second shonen film that they ended up putting out, which I didn't watch, but it's like any of the others would have been a better choice. Blue Giant, phenomenal jazz rendition. Kaguya's First Kiss, which was like a great way to see how these two reacted as a couple now. Psycho-Pass Providence. Interesting, really caught me off guard at the end of the movie. Just on that alone, I would have put it above Suzume. And then a lot of people have been saying the first Slam Dunk is probably the best of the bunch, especially considering that even though it is something that takes place, I believe, after the anime series, which I still need to watch, it is still probably one of the best sports films to come out in recent years, so I'm really going to have to give that a watch. The best new anime series between Bocchi, Chainsaw Man, Heavenly Delusion, Hell's Paradise, Oshinoko, and Zom 100. I am kind of glad that Chainsaw Man was actually able to get its due in one of these. If I had to pick between any of these, it would be Bocchi the Rock and Chainsaw Man and Heavenly Delusion. Any of those three could have taken it, and any of them could have won, and I would have been happy. But considering it's still been this long, and we are going to be getting the Chainsaw Man movie, I believe, coming out this year, I'm extremely excited. The best continuing show, I don't really think there's any doubt. The only one that could have come close to winning this, to me, would have either been JJK or Vinland Saga Season 2, but the fact that One Piece with the Wano arc, what it was able to do, and the heights that they were able to achieve, it was such a phenomenal piece, and as a continuing show, it was bar none the best one, even though I can guarantee you that most people who didn't know that they were voting for One Piece decided to vote on this just because they ended up seeing clips of the different fights that were happening inside of the Wano arc over the course of this year. I can guarantee you that the vast majority of people have not watched more than 10 episodes of One Piece. However, those clips that they ended up watching over the course of the year, it's like, oh shit, I guess One Piece is good now. I'll have the opportunity to go and watch this and give it the best continuing series. And so finally, at the end of the day, we get to the one that, of course, I already knew before, which was Anime of the Year, which unanimously was just JJK Season 2. It ran continually all the way up to the end of 2024. So if I see a single nomination for JJK Season 2 next year inside of the Anime Awards, it's not like I'm going to fucking drop them consistently. I'm only just checking in just to kind of see how ridiculous the nominees this year were. But if they decided to keep it in this year and not, and then just throw away the rulebook in the next year and say, hey, JJK Season 2 also had an episode that aired in 2024, so we're gonna give it a nomination here. It's like, yeah. I honestly did not realize, because they just... And the same deal, I can't believe I didn't notice this until the end, that they called this the Anime Awards winner of 2024, and they gave it to a show that came out in 2022 for Chainsaw Man. It's like, what the fuck are you doing? What is the point of this? Why is this even something that we should be doing now that you are completely throwing away any legitimacy that you're going for as an award show? Just call it a popularity contest. Most popular anime of the year 2025 goes to JJK Season 2. Odds are that's probably what's going to happen. And it's like, I don't know, man. It's, at the end of the day, I know I've been complaining for the majority of the last half of this episode, but it's just, I want there to be a stage for these specific shows and these people to be recognized, and not just a wank session, a collective wank session of the most popular shows getting the most awards at the end of the day. Because if you're just going to... Look, I'm not saying that JJK Season 2 was a bad show. I really did enjoy it. But the fact that it was able to squeak in by a technicality and walk in and win 11 of the 32 awards, to me, is just fucking asinine. Although to be fair, now that I'm thinking about it, if we're going to be talking about what shows are going to be winning the most awards next year, unless we have a ridiculous turnout into the spring and the summer anime seasons this year, then the only silver lining and the only positive thing that I can look forward to in these award shows next year is that Freyrin and Apothecary Diaries are going to be making sweeps across the board. So just, at the end of the day, think a little about what you're voting on. Maybe have the opportunity to use these award shows. One of the only positive things I can say about these award shows is that maybe if you saw something that you didn't recognize or that you didn't watch, put it on your watch list. Give yourself an opportunity to go back and rewatch a lot of the things that you would have missed inside of that year. I'm going to do it for Uma Musume, and I'm going to be doing it for Serenity Season 2. I'm hoping that you can at least find the opportunity to do a little more digging yourselves. Alright, so a little addendum here. I just got back and was also listening to a podcast episode from ANN that I was waiting until after I had done this episode and read through the list of winners on what exactly the case was so I didn't get spoiled too much, and had the opportunity to go through and see their thoughts on the whole award ceremony thing. And it didn't help me at all. It gave me more information, but all it did was make me even more irrationally angry than I already should have. Where, let me be clear, I'm not angry at the results of the anime that won all the specific awards. I am angry because the system that they ended up making for all of the nominations and the voting and everything else is just so broken and flawed, and just an incredibly lazy attempt, especially when you are supposed to be the quote-unquote premier anime site for the biggest anime award ceremony in the world. That is when I start getting ticked off. When essentially you are going through and saying, hey, we are going to have like all this big award ceremony in Japan, and we're going to be holding the winners for all the nominations that we ended up getting. And, I mean, dude, the awards that they were giving out, on top of the case where I just assumed that the nominations were made by the jury, and this jury was at least made of people who had seen the majority of the shows that had come out in each specific genre, and then they would have the opportunity to give the majority of it to the public vote. Where, in reality, all they did for the jurors is that they didn't even have to have watched all of the specific nominees for any specific category, which of course is tough when you're talking about character design, when you're talking about Pledge to Protect, you're talking about all these irrelevant names in the titles. They are asking either jurors to be from content creators or people that worked at Crunchyroll, or one of them apparently was a New York Times journalist, if that even fucking matters at all. It's like, I don't care what your profession is, as long as you have seen all of the things that you need to see to give a proper amount of information and shows their due diligence to have the opportunity for them to be nominated, then I don't care what you do. But the fact that the juries, the judges and the jury, considering that Lindsay Loveridge, who is a part of the ANN After Show, was one of the judge and jurors, she didn't even need to have watched everything that she was nominating. Everybody was just given these handful of categories to then nominate shows for these specific categories, and they only needed to watch an indeterminate... all they needed to do was, hey, do you watch anime? Okay, cool. Then you can become a judge or a juror to figure out who gets nominated, and then you get to vote after the nominations have been made. So they could have asked, like, some random fan on the street, me, some random fan on the street. I didn't watch a lot last year. I probably watched... Actually, no, hold on. I can tell you exactly how many shows I watched last year. I watched 31 seasonal shows last year. So, on average, that was just me watching around 7 to 8 shows every new season. So you could have randomly asked me, and I would have had just as much of a say in what shows deserve to get nominated and what shows deserve to be voted in. Because I can guarantee you, I do not deserve or have any say in that, considering 30... on average, is probably a bit above the standard fan, but not anywhere close to somebody who's supposed to be a juror or a judge nominating an entire category of shows that came out, like, which is probably near 200 shows that came out last year alone. And then, of course, the random bullshit that's like, oh, but then the fall 2022 anime season. That also is coming into play. So still call it about 200 shows. You are asking all of these people... This system is just so fucking ridiculous, like how this is the legitimate case. You're telling me that anywhere around these 40 judges and jurors essentially have to nominate these specific shows to be in each specific category, where they have, odds are, have not seen even half of any show that deserves to be in that specific category. They could have watched only one action show a year, yet they would have still been given the opportunity to vote on what shows deserve to be nominated for Best Action Show of the Year. How are you supposed to do that when you've only seen one action series in that entire tenure? Where it's kind of like, oh, well, because we ended, like, same deal, the 3-month gap that they give, so they have more opportunities to set up this event and give them more time to do so, they don't need to do anything. They have so much other shit on their plate that they have jobs. The vast majority of these judges, I would imagine, are already working full-time for either Crunchyroll or ANN or doing content creation online. They don't have the time to go and backtrack and double-check and rewatch other things so they can have, like, a handful of extra shows to add into the mix. So you're talking about, like, the only content creator I know that watched, which was literally his entire thing, he watched every new seasonal that came out last year, and that is Arcada from Glass Reflection. And guess what? He watched the first episode, like the first 1 to 3 episodes of each show, and 75% of the shows he didn't go and, like, complete it. He didn't go past the 3-episode mark. And that's a dude who watched the beginning of every single series, and he didn't even finish half of them. So how are you expecting anybody else, any of the jurors, to have a greater understanding or a greater net to cast on any kind of shows in that specific property like, they're literally just, their glass is at least half empty on all of the opportunities and all of the other shows that they could have done. So, of course, even though for most of them it is their job to be inside and reporting and analyzing the animated industry, that doesn't mean that they're going to watch a majority of the shows that came out that year just so they can be a juror or a judge at the end of the year for this, frankly, asinine and poorly produced section of what they call an award show. Like, are you fucking kidding me? All this episode did was I learned more about it, and all it did was make me angry. Like, even somebody who was one of the previous judges, he used to work for Crunchyroll, he didn't anymore. Last year, when he was one of the judges, the percentage that the judges had, with their vote had over the entire public vote, they gave the judges' votes 70% of the weighted, and the fans 30% of the weighting. And so not only did we still, like, last year wasn't as bad, even though there was still quite a decent chunk of it being in between two other shows, but then this year, if you're telling me that from this year they stuck with the same system, which is, there is no fucking way. If you're telling me that they stuck with the same system, with a 70% weight on the jurors and a 30% weighted vote on the entire public vote, and you still had more than a third of the awards going to Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2, then you already know that the system is flawed and fucked up and there needs to be change. Everybody, because whenever there is a public vote on anything, it's funny, it's kind of funny in most ways, but then when you try and parade yourself as like an objective award ceremony, that's where I draw the line. When you are trying to sell yourself as the biggest and most notoriety with the best judges and the broadest take that you can get for an international audience for an award show, that's when I call you out on your bullshit. Like, not every award show is perfect. Because it is an award show, you know that there's always going to be either financial bias, infringement, and obstruction by the companies that want this thing to be something else and something more marketable and more notable than any of the others, considering that that's what working for a company does, and they're looking for some kind of return on these events, whether it is something like the Oscars or the Razzies or the Emmys or like anything related to those things. It is mostly a way for a production and advertisement to at least go through and push more of the products that they've been selling. But this system, especially with the bullshit, like I said earlier before in the episode, where Jujutsu Kaisen Season 2 had only 6 episodes come out in the section that they deemed to be nominated, and then the other 3/4 of the show happened outside of that, and yet they still let it in, because I would imagine there was something, like, maybe, of course they didn't. Like, that was the thing. They didn't clearly explain that, not to the judges, not to the jurors, not to the audience. They just accepted and expected, oh, we're just going to accept the best in people, that they're only going to vote on Jujutsu Kaisen for the first 6 episodes like we expected to. And because those came out before the deadline, the entire show is up for nomination. Because, of course, they did specials. They put in the second fucking opening. So it's like, what is your goal? Like, there's always going to be 1 or 2 shows, granted, that will make it through, that'll slip past the rules, because that's kind of how it is. You can't have a universal set that is always going to be accepted and always going to, and just be an infallible system. No, there are going to be holes and there are going to be flaws, and there are always going to be shows that are going to be slipping through the cracks. But the fact that, of course, it was JJK, the one who essentially just nose to the grindstone, took every single one of their animators and everybody who worked there and made their lives a living hell for a good 18 months for the entirety of this production, even leading into the production. Like, they were still nose to the grindstone as the show was coming out. The fact that this is going to be the show that they openly accept and they openly herald as the greatest show of 2023, which is already bullshit. However, at the end of the day, what is the point of all this? What's the end game here other than, well, look, it's an advertisement. Like you said yourself, it's an award show. It's there to advertise, market, and make money. Cool. But if anybody is asinine to even think that this is sustainable moving forward, or this is a good rule set and a good model to follow, I can think of any negative expletive to just not necessarily. Well, it's just incredibly difficult to defend anybody who would defend this system. Which is kind of why I do like the mix. I do like, because the difference here is that with the R Anime Awards, people go into this expecting that this is what they have to do. They are expected to say, hey, this is going to be a big time commitment. This is going to be a sync where you are going to be putting out more than 2 months of your life to just watch anime and go into a jurors table and have a roundtable discussion on which shows were better and which shows were worse and which ones deserve the nomination and which don't. That is the expectation. The people going into this award ceremony for the R Anime Awards know the expectation of the time that they are going to have to commit in order to get this right, which is the most important part, to get it right. And to me, getting it right means having a jury that has seen every single show of the specific category that they are voting on. Not somebody who watched 2 romance shows all year and then is expected to say, hey, we need you to nominate the 6 best romances of the year. It's a complete fucking mess. So now we go to the expectations of the Crunchyroll anime jurors and judges. You have to be related to the industry, and you have had to have watched at least, of course, I'm going to throw out a fucking random number. Let's just say you're going to need to have at least watched 15 shows in this year in order to at least have the opportunity to nominate specific things for these categories that are going to be voted on by the general public. That is so fucking stupid. You could ask a random fan who just got into anime, had only seen 10 to 15 shows in their life this year, and they would have had as much say as a juror or somebody who works for Crunchyroll, somebody who works for ANN, somebody who works for the Wall Street Journal. This random schmuck has as much say as anybody else that is a part of the jury. And even worse, anybody voting, which is why public voting sucks and why, if you want any kind of notoriety or legitimate objectivity on these shows that are going to be considered the best in their category and the best of their craft, if you're telling me that this person watched their first anime yesterday and they're voting on the best action series and it just happens to be Demon Slayer, their vote has as much leeway and as much say as somebody who has watched every single show that came out that year. That is the dichotomy. And then, of course, it's kind of well, you want the clicks, you want the engagement from the crowd to make them feel like their vote mattered and they were able to participate in this medium that they still do enjoy and feel like their voice has a say. Awesome. Do the R Anime section where you have a public vote and you have a jury vote. So you have a section where it's kind of you get to keep the popularity contest, you get to keep the user engagement and see what the audience's favorites in each of these categories were. And then you have a jury vote made up of people who actually watched every single show from that category, which for the Crunchyroll Awards is not a lot. It is 6. It's definitely a much larger commitment, especially when it comes to the R Anime, because every single category is anywhere between 8 and 10 shows. But this is a 6 show or a 6 character, 6 nominee section. The least that you could do is vote on something where you have seen every single show inside of that category. And so now she's telling me that the judge and the jurors were only selected because they wanted to take part. Cool. It's the same deal. But the expectations of the jurors inside of the R Anime Awards was that they were going to watch every show in the category that they are voting on. And the expectation of the jurors that are taking part in the Crunchyroll Anime Awards is that they watch anime and it is a part of their job. Cool. That doesn't mean jack shit. These awards mean jack shit. Because if this is the most notable, the largest audience for the biggest quote-unquote anime award show in the world, and you're telling me that this is the setup for how your stuff is voted on, it is fucking ridiculous. Because then, what's the point? Also, the shows that get nominated, who's representing them? It's easy enough when you are doing a voice acting award because then the voice actor or actress has the opportunity to represent themselves. But you are representing an entire show, and if you're telling me that it's not the director, but it's more of the producer, or it is the president or the CEO or anybody that is a representative of the company that had no hand in making the show that we all know is driving everybody in that production to insanity, especially JJK Season 2, because this is just like icing on the cake, where it's kind of like the one show that we decided to put up on a pedestal and win at least a third of the awards in the year is the one that literally drove people to saying, I want to die on Twitter, that is legitimately having production members considering suicide because of how horrible the production was on this. And this is the one that we are going to point out, and this is the one that we're going to be representing as fully as the anime community. I can't separate the art from the artist in that section. I can't just say, hey, I liked JJK Season 2, but then just completely ignore. I can't do that anymore. I can't just ignore all of the horrific shit that these phenomenal artists had to go through to just get this product out the door. It is insane how this is going to be the one that we have to represent. This is going to be the one that's going through, which is totally fine because I'm not even on Twitter, X, whatever the fuck you want to call it. Most of the information I get is either from ANN or the R Anime subreddit. And even then, even though I'm not on social media, I still see all the garbage and the horrors behind the scenes that are happening. And the fact that the ones that are going to represent JJK accepting all of these awards and it's being represented by either the producers or the voice actors, or the best animation of the night was represented by one of the voice actors of the show. So who exactly are we representing here? What is the end game? What is the point? That's at the end of the day, outside of money, which is the simplest answer and it's the easiest answer and it's the one that's always going to be consistently, that answer is enough. It's not. So yeah, if we're looking to just make a better system, I don't know, man. It's that easy. It's just that they just need to put any, because it definitely seems like the priorities in how the event is set up is we need to do the production, we need to do the event first, and then we are going to think about the awards second, which already fucking stupid. But it's at the end of the day, that's it. Just have a vetting process just to have your jurors be better. Don't just hand that shit out to anybody that works inside the industry, where it's kind of have you at least watched more than 5 shows inside of a specific category this year? Because not only is that going to broaden the scope of the amount of nominees that we can actually put in here, because you actually have more people that have watched more anime, just give it a broader aspect. This has been going on for years. That's also the worst thing. This has been an award show that has gone on for more than 5 years, and it's still garbage. Whatever they, on the system, it's still just the worst running machine that I have seen in a fucking long while. But because the machine still runs and it still makes money, it's theirs. So just have a better vetting process for your judges so you can nominate more stuff, so you can have better chances for jurors and judges that have actually watched a good chunk of shows to give them more opportunities. Also, represent, have more people inside of the industry to actually be represented. It's don't just let it be producers and CEOs and VAs to accept shit like cinematography and animation. Give that to a key animator, an episode director, the series composition for the show. Have somebody relevant who actually makes this stuff happen be the one to accept the award, so it's not just a bunch of corporate literous fucking faces that are going to be accepting the majority of the credit for everything that's happening in the dungeon below. And for the love of God, if you don't want this to be a popularity contest, which of course they do because it drives up engagement, but then, for Christ's sake, you don't have to get rid of the public vote. Just give the public a vote. Give it a public nomination award. Easy. all said and done. And then when you have a actual decent set of jurors who have watched everything, then you can have the opportunity to give like the real anime award goes to. For Christ's sake. This spicy habanero hazy ale is just, I don't know. It definitely has been bringing out the worst in me, but I'm just tired. Being angry about something, it's not worth it. It just makes you tired. And honestly, with the rest of the things that have happened here, I'm kind of glad that the award season is over, so I don't necessarily have to worry about this too much until they inevitably just don't heed any of the warnings and they decide to make another series and another setup next year, and they're just going to continuously fuck it up. So whoever is in charge of setting up the rules for whatever kind of horrifically fucked up and lazy system that you've got going here, just be better. Alright, cheers, have a good night.